Well, welcome everyone to this Wednesday edition of the Tourism Forum. For those I have not met yet, my name is Katie Keeney. I am the Outreach and Engagement Coordinator for the Tourism Office through IEDA. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. If you have been joining us, thank you for your participation and feedback. We really appreciate it. And you may notice now that there are more video screens up during the portion of teams than what there have been in the past. So I'm looking forward to seeing some more faces. If you do not want your video to show, you can always choose the turn camera off function. Feel free to do that if you would prefer. But just a couple of notes before we jump right into today's topic from Arrivalist. Just wanted to make sure that those in our industry did hear Governor Reynolds' announcement today, letting us know that effective Friday, May 22nd, museums, aquariums, zoos, movie theaters, wedding reception venues, and swimming pools will be able to reopen with appropriate public health measures in place. And then effective Thursday, May 28th, bars and other alcohol-related establishments that have been limited to carry out and delivery will be permitted to reopen for indoor and outdoor seating, also following public health measures. We have put those updates of reopenings on our Travel Iowa website, traveliowa.com. Under our COVID-19 traveler information. So individuals who are visiting our website can see updates on what currently is open thus far. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. And with that announcement, we'll go ahead and I'm going to let Timony Axtell from Arrivalist take over. She's going to be presenting on some Iowa-specific data from Arrivalist of what we've been seeing during this time. So, Timony, go ahead and take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'll just flip onto my screen share here. And Katie, can you confirm that everyone can see my slide now?
Nothing yet.
Not yet. Okay, let me try again. Here we go. Okay, and now?
It's working out. Yep, we're good to go.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. I met some of you at the tourism conference just a couple of months ago. It not a long time ago. We're really lucky that we got to meet in person. Who knows when that will be able to occur again. So I was glad to be able to connect with you in person during that window. Today, we're going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on visitation to and within Iowa, and also roll out some free tools to you. I understand these are mostly DMOs that they're on the call today. Part of what we release to you, you can generate on demand. And my hope for today, after this brief segment, is that we can bring a bit of clarity in this time of chaos. There are so many unknowns, and we can use this location basically to serve up some opportunities and hopefully find the silver lining together. There is no more important time than during crisis to be data-driven. So no matter what size your organization is, it is key to be using data in your recovery efforts. So in case you're not familiar with Arrivalist, I'll tell you a little bit about the company. My apologies if this is a repeat. We work with about 150 clients, 40 US states, nearly 100 city and county destinations. We also work with airports, museums, zoos, amusement parks, and some other verticals, but everything is in the travel industry. We're built for tourism, DMOs, and we continue to serve that industry exclusively. I personally work with about 30 other clients, including Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Texas, and Florida, of course, in addition to Iowa, which is great because the team and I can get this macroeconomic view of the trends that are occurring. And that's what we're trying to do more and more, is use all these trends that we are observing from the industry and our client base
Timmy?
Yeah.
Timmy, I'm just going to interrupt you real quick. I'm not sure if it's my computer. Can everyone hear Timony okay, or is it just my computer?
No, I can't hear it. It's muffled.
Okay.
Let me make sure my, yeah, that's on. I all of a sudden started to hear some noise, maybe if someone had unmuted their phone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you better.
Okay, perfect. I'll try to get a little bit closer. So Arrivalist works from a panel of 120 million US residents, and we analyze anonymous data and report back to our clients when we observe trips taking place that have a minimum distance of 50 miles, a minimum length of stay in Iowa of 2 hours. We weed out commuters, we weed out relocators, and we even have mechanisms if we want to for weeding out that traffic that's passing through, even if they meet some of the minimum time criteria. So we do work from a panel. We report on aggregate data, but with enough precision that you all can take action from it. Some of the key insights we offer to our clients include the who, what, when, where, and how of visitation. Who is visiting in terms of those origin markets? How frequently do they make a return trip? Points of interest, what is the competitive share between each of the points of interest in the state? What kind of cross-visitation do we see in market? What seasonality do we observe? And how well does media generate incremental trips as well as inspire longer lengths of stay inside the destination? Today, we're going to focus on some things that are established and some things that are completely new. First, I would like to show you some research from last year, as well as from the past 2 months, some normalized data on the effects of COVID-19. Second, I would like to show you the US Daily Travel Index and how to pull out some insights on Iowa's mobility in terms of people getting behind the wheel and making drive trips again. And third, we'll look at some owned media indicators from Iowa's websites that we're tracking. So now to go into some of our data. First, this is a representation of visitation to and within Iowa for calendar year 2019, broken up by month. And what you see in blue there, those are the overnight trips. The day trips are in green. We know that overnights are critical for bed tax, but day trips are also important because the small businesses will really make up the fabric of the experience that your visitors have. So now is a time when we are more inclusive of day trippers and counting them in our reporting and paying attention to what they do too, because we know that they can help to stimulate the economy, help to keep small businesses open, despite overnights being the most critical for DMOs. So what we see here is that March and April of last year, which will be the focus for these next 2 slides, were responsible for 15.2% of overall trips to destinations inside the state. Now, fortunately, these were not the biggest months for Iowa last year. And what we're hoping is that some of the losses that we saw in March and April can be pushed forward since there is so much pent-up demand, according to some other sources. Perhaps that recovery can be seen maybe even starting Memorial Day and beyond, and really push up those summer numbers. Now, if we look at March and April of this year, I'm going to go from a monthly view to a daily view, and that is because it's so subtle the way things change that a monthly view is not going to serve us. What you see here is in green, the 2020 overnight arrivals and the 2019 overnight arrivals. And here we are filtering out day trips just so we could have a really clean comparison year over year of those higher value visitors, along with some of the key milestones for the state. We have normalized data through April 30th for this set of reports. In a little bit, I'll give you some even more recent data where some of those recent announcements are going to soon come into play. But we do see that for that first week in March was actually quite strong. And the second week was strong as well. Those peaks you see from 2019, those are all weekend peaks. And here we are measuring flyers, drivers. We are mostly drivers, but we are not filtering out any flyers in this set of reports. So weekend peaks, the first 2 weeks of March were quite strong. Then we saw things drop off. And after they dropped off, they remained quite level with some fluctuations. There towards the end of April, we do see a small burst of visitation. But overall, March was stronger than April for visitation, which is what we see across most of our clients, is that people were kind of squeezing in that first bit of spring break, but April was not great. So that's the not good news. But let's get into some ways to segment this that can be helpful as you plan for recovery. First, when we look at how visitors made trips into the state of Iowa, we actually see some relative positives. We know that typically when we look at March and April of last year, that much of the visitation was concentrated in some of the top counties, those urban areas. And what we see overall is despite all of the counties losing volume share, we're seeing more dispersion throughout the state. So if we take all those trips that were greater in volume last year versus all the trips lower in volume this year and spread those out across the counties, there was actually more visitation to the rest of the state outside of these top 10. Polk County, Johnson County went down, but relatively speaking, there were gains within the rest of Iowa, which, even though this isn't great news overall, it is a bit of a silver lining because dispersion is good. It increases sustainability for the state as people visit places that they weren't necessarily planning to visit before. And we do see that dispersion, we think, because of the drive markets. And here we're looking at something very similar, but we're going to be looking at visitation for March year over year at the DMA level. And here too, these are market clusters. So you'll see some cities that are outside of Iowa here on the list. That's just for DMAs that do straddle the border. But for Des Moines and Ames, you can see the market share year over year for March, as well as the year over year change. And so for Des Moines and Cedar Rapids, they actually lost market share, but some of these others, relatively speaking, gained share, even though they were all down in volume. So just showing some of the dynamics of how visitors experience the state in terms of which DMAs they visit, which counties they visit. Now, no longer looking at the past, looking at the future, we can understand who may be likely to visit this summer based on who visited last year. So I'm looking at June 1st to September 4th. So just after Memorial Day, all the way through Labor Day, those visitors that you may potentially influence to come back. So we can learn from the past, apply that to the future. So listed here, these are actually the states rather than market clusters, their share of trips and the length of stay in terms of hours and minutes that they stayed in the state of Iowa, ranked by top 10. And those top 3 Iowa in-state visitors, Illinois and Nebraska, actually add up to about 3 and 4 of the visits overall. So that's the core, the powerhouse. So if you can get them to make a repeat visit, they're more familiar with the market. They may be the lower hanging fruit to invite back into the fold rather than someone who is further away, not as familiar with the nuances of the experience. Those who've already made trips, you can move them through the funnel. And that's what this next one is about, going from the state down to the DMA level. This is a resource to you. These are the top Origin DMAs for overnight visitors. It is for all of 2019. We chose a longer window because we want to be able to look at repeat visit rates. There are 3 indicators here. One is volume. These are the Origin DMAs, the top 15 ranked by trip share, meaning we take all of the trips from all of those DMAs and break them out. Des Moines Ames DMA was responsible for 11.6% of trips overall, of at least 50 miles, at least 2 hours in that Iowa destination. Repeat visit rate is the rate at which they make more than one trip. So we use smartphones to understand unique visitors, and we can deduplicate them to understand whether a single more than one trip, along with length of stay. So these are some KPIs that can help you to triangulate which markets you may wish to invite back. And with repeat visit rate, again, if they know the product, they're familiar with it, they may be easier to bring back into the fold to make a second trip or a third trip. So with all of this data, it is really pointing us with some of the state rankings and with those DMA rankings toward drive markets, already a strong suit for Iowa. The lower hanging fruit, people are going to be getting behind the wheel and driving where they have control. They are going to be substituting away from flights, not completely, but substituting to some degree away from flights toward driving where they feel safer, where they have the control behind the wheel. So for that reason, our team dropped everything about 2 months ago to produce a product that's called the Daily Travel Index. We had grand plans before the crisis began, as I'm sure all of you did, for events you were going to plan and things you were going to sponsor, but we decided we should invest 100% of our resources in providing something not only to our clients, but the entire industry. So what I'll show you actually lives on our website and it's updated every day. It's at arrivalist.com, and there's a banner that will drive you to the Daily Travel Index page. So the Daily Travel Index is a new panel. It's focused exclusively on drivers because we know that drivers who are making regional trips will catalyze economic recovery. That's what we're banking on, at least. So DTA live to you. It's updated every day. There is a lag of about 2 days. So for Memorial Day, we'd probably be looking at Wednesday of next week to be able to see what happened in terms of increased mobility. And with this panel, we are, like the trip model, looking for drivers to drive at least 50 miles, spend at least 2 hours in a destination, and it's going to be focused on origin markets instead of the destination. Why origin markets? Well, we want to provide a tool that allows people to see when origin markets are mobilizing, when people are getting behind the wheel and making long drives, because that means that we may want to start talking to them and inviting them back. They may be showing signs that they're ready to make those trips. So all focused on origin markets. And we do things like filter out commuters and freight, just like we do in our normal trip model that Iowa Economic Development has a subscription to. So on the site, there are some, there's a glossary of definitions, how to use the 3 indices. We have a line graph view as well as a map view where you can compare states. So I'll show you some examples of the information that we have pulled for Iowa. So first here, we're looking at Iowa drivers who are making trips of 50 plus miles. This index is based on an average number of daily trips in the month of February. Why February? Well, it was recent, and February tends to be a pretty unremarkable month for most destinations. For some, it was blockbuster this year, which means they have a higher bar to reach. But for most, it's a normal month in the sense that there is one long holiday weekend, but otherwise relatively steady as you're coming out of all the holidays. So comparing each day to that February average, This line graph is showing the index. So where we see for President's Day that we're about 80% higher than the index, that means 80% higher than the February average. And then when we dip below zero, that's where we get into that being significantly lower than that February average. What you'll see right away is some of these obvious weekend peaks, very similar to what we saw with the A3 trip data in the data set. Here we are measuring just drivers. So this is a representation of how mobile people are in terms of making drives of at least 50 miles. If you go into our website, we also have ways to filter for trips of at least 100 miles, even 250 miles. The way we typically start is with those shorter trips, and then we build. So I'll show you some stats on that in just a minute. These are some of the key milestones. On March 8th, there were 3 daily new cases recorded in Iowa. And it looks like this most precipitous drop occurred somewhere in between the White House's the 15-day slow the spread announcement and Governor Reynolds declaring the state of public health disaster. So it's hard to say which one of those had more of an effect. But what is interesting is that when we plot out the daily new cases of COVID, and here's some of the things, by the way, that we're going to be paying attention to in our daily travel index over the next week. The fact that, like Katie said, that your movie theaters, museums, and zoos are opening, your pools, and then bars opening next week. So we'll keep an eye on that. But interesting to note that this precipitous drop looks like it had more to do with some of those proclamations and some of that guidance at the national level, rather than from the daily new cases that were being reported. They seem to have peaked on May 2nd. We are hoping for a V-shaped recovery rather than a W-shaped recovery where there's another wave of the virus. So that is what we're hoping for. But interesting to see that even as some of these cases, new cases were reported, we saw the mobility start to increase and get closer to that 0 point. Another way to use the daily travel index is a map view. And from that previous chart, we could see that Illinois was a key origin market for Iowa during the months of June to September 4th at 10.7%. So after Iowa, Illinois was the most significant. And what we can do is look at how Iowa and Illinois are recovering compared to other states. So in this map view, we're looking at the daily travel index, and we're also going to look at the week over week index. In this case, I'm raising the bar up to a 250-mile minimum traveled from home in one direction to see if people are starting to make that longer haul travel. So this data is from May 18th, actually, not the 12th. I'll fix that. As of May 18th, Iowa, compared to that February average, was at negative 31.7%, and Illinois a little bit behind at negative 38.2%, but not as severe as some of the other states in the West and along the East Coast. Now, what we're really happy about is that when we look at week over week change, we're starting to see green. When we first launched this product at the very end of March, everything was red, and we were concerned it was too gloomy. It wouldn't give people a reason for hope, and we were just waiting and waiting until we started to see some green on these maps, and we are finally seeing this. So when we look at May 12th to May 18th, those 7 days compared to the prior 7 days, Iowa's actually up 16.7%. Illinois is up 19.7%. So this is healthy. So even if they're not up to that February level, they are making gains in those longer trips of 250 miles week over week. So this is a good place to keep an eye on your competitors / your feeder markets to see how they are mobilizing and getting behind the wheel compared to that February average. So this again is free to you. It's updated every day. And we do see some really neat things as restrictions are lifted over time. We see those dynamics express themselves every day. And then the last portion I wanted to share with you, we're going to set aside all the visitation data and concentrate on owned media. Owned media is just another way of saying the media that you control, the channels where you control the message, including predominantly your websites, along with some emails that you deploy to your subscribers. The reason we're paying attention to this now is because owned media is typically an indicator of intent to travel to a destination. In fact, it is often mid to low funnel, people who have already selected the destination for a trip and who are interested in informing their itineraries and understanding what the experience is going to be like. Two, what we are seeing is that for the websites that are the most buoyant in terms of staving off the decline, it is because they are providing relevant, up-to-date, accurate information on what is open and what is closed so that they can better inform those visitors. So it's important that you have that COVID information front and center so that someone who is coming to visit you can understand, if they're nearby, if you are open now, what your hours are, and then if you are planning a visit in a month, what to expect at that point. And the great thing here is that you do not need to be working with Arrivalist to study your website visitors. I'm sure most of you have Google Analytics or all sorts of free web analytics tools. And here, what we're looking at is Iowa Economic Development, Travel Iowa, and this is Iowa. Arrivalist has pixels placed on all of these websites so we can see every time a page view fires and then how that relates to people actually coming into the destination later. So we have almost a year of data. We started tracking on April 30th, which is why the April, it looks so small here. And we have data through about mid-May right now, but we left this April to April here, so it was a clean cutoff. And what we're seeing, whereas most destination websites dropped precipitously in March and barely maintained any buoyancy in April, for these three sites that we have pixeled, they actually increased. So people are going to those websites, the Iowa Economic Development, Travel Iowa, and this is Iowa, to get information and to potentially plan their future trips. So I think this is a testament to excellent organic search that takes a long time to develop, and also to making sure that these websites have the most up-to-date and accurate information. So that is very positive. The blue is a representation of the exposures, which is just another way of saying the page views. And then the arrivals are plotted. All the arrivals that we've observed that were exposed to those three websites, those are plotted here too, across the month. So every time someone sees a page view, we watch to see if they actually arrive. And March and April were not terribly low months for those who had made a visit to the website. So the Iowa websites are really bucking some of the negative trends we're seeing. And you, as stakeholders, it's just important to pay attention to those. In terms of timing, we also observe how long it takes those in certain distance from the destination to arrive in market. And typically we see an upward trend here. It's going to take someone who's coming from more than 500 miles, 64 days, as opposed to someone who's coming much closer in, about 60 days. So roughly 2 months from when they first see that website page view to actually arriving at their destination in Iowa. And we show this because it's important to understand In normal time, okay, this is April 30th to about May 15th. In normal time, how long does it take them to arrive in their destination? Okay, about 2 months, maybe 3 months if they're coming from further away. Most of our clients are going to be concentrating on these closer in distance spans and working their way out to 500. We've seen some other sources like Destination Analytics have said people may be willing to travel on road trips 600 to 700 miles. So that's positive. You may be able to reach them and pull them in from this distance from home. But knowing time to arrival can help you to decide whether someone visiting your website is going to visit. They're visiting the next day, or should you be putting out information about 4th of July and great vacation rental spots to watch the fireworks in the safety of your own space? Or should you be putting out a message about the last hurrah before school hopefully goes back in for the school year? So hopefully this is helpful. I mean, anything could change since we are dealing with this unprecedented crisis, but having some baseline on what has happened the past year in terms of the overall trip data, the attribution data, plus this new daily travel index hopefully gives you some tools to help with your website messaging, to understand when origin markets may be mobilizing, and then understanding what that reaction is to the novel coronavirus in terms of visitation in your area. So these are some of the takeaways. I hope this has been helpful for you. Again, this will be distributed. You'll have a copy of this deck with the tables and some of the graphs that you can use. Daily Travel Index is available every day on our website, so you can check that out now. And the media indicators will hopefully help you plan for your website messaging. On Daily Travel Index, you can also check out your competitors. You can check out those key feeder markets that are in that chart, Iowa and Nebraska, and pay attention to when they are making these longer trips. So you can learn from them from a competitive standpoint and also inviting them back to your destination in Iowa. So that's about all. I do want to mention we have some new products, features, innovations coming Iowa's way in terms of demographic reporting, zip code level reporting. So now that we've invested our time in this daily travel index, we are thinking about what's next. We don't want to get too distracted because we know the recovery, it's going to happen. And I hope it starts with this weekend and a very strong Memorial Day for the state of Iowa. We will certainly be watching and we'd love to hear from you. We love all the anecdotal, the stories, hearing how your occupancy was, so we can get a really full picture of what happened in destination. If you have any questions, I would be glad to take them.
Thank you, Timony. And if there are questions that pop up, Timony, if you wouldn't mind just staying on while Luann does her portion, just in case there's any questions that come up a little bit later, that would be great.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Luann, who's going to go over our Arrivalist Iowa dashboard, which will go up on our industry partners page under the research tab. So Luann, it's all yours.
All right, I'm Luann Reinders with the Iowa Tourism Office, and I am the research manager for the group. So this arrival list information is just extremely exciting to have, and we'll give you the link to the daily travel indicator too, and it's just amazing the patterns you can see and the way you can dive into it and really get some real-time information. What I'm going to go through is we will be launching a dashboard, arrival list information that will hopefully help you talk to your stakeholders and provide information to them. One thing we need to keep in mind, though, with the arrival list information, it is real information, it's real data from people that we have paid in their cell phones or their smartphones. So people that are counting into the arrival list information, they must have a smartphone. Travel at least 50 miles away from home, spend at least 2 hours in Iowa. They have to have time frame of at least 2 weeks. So we don't get data immediately. We have a 2-week lag before we get the data. It includes adults 18 plus, US visitors only, no commuters, devices with a GPS ping. So with that in mind, all of that in mind, I'm happy to announce that provides us with 28.3 million visitors to the state of Iowa in 2019. And we've been hungry for that information for a really long time to know how many travelers come to our state. And now we know. And this is a conservative number. You know, I gave you all the parameters just a second ago. So with all that in mind, it is a very conservative number, that 28.3 million visitors to the state of Iowa. And then we also know from Arrivalist that 43% of our travelers are in-state, and the balance is from the out-of-state of Iowa. And this graph below shows us the percentage of visitors that come to our state every single month. And July is the peak month for Iowa for our travelers. And that seems to go in trend with a lot of school kids. You finally get a week's break in July to travel with everyone. And this is really nice for us to know, sitting here in May with everything shut down, that our peak months should be ahead of us. So we had that general overview information on the dashboard, and then we're also able to determine how many travelers we get from all the states around us. So this page just really specifically shows us the share that each state has and the number of people from each one of those states. The next page that is on the dashboard shows us the day that people come into Iowa, the day that they arrive. You know, so it starts on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Those are the days they are coming into Iowa. Then it shows you below that what day they arrive, how long they stay. You know, so Thursday and Friday when they're coming in is a little bit longer than they're staying in the state of Iowa. Then how far they travel. So arrivals altogether, you have to travel at least 50 miles to be counted as a trip. So between that and this chart below us, it shows how far they travel, how long they stay. And that's one of the reasons we really market heavily to out of state, you know, because the farther they travel, the longer they stay, the more money they spend. So on the next page, we're really looking at season of travel. So of course, summer is our peak travel period of 33% of our travelers. And then going into the fall is 27.3% of our travelers. You know, and that's really good for us, you know, that Adara has really told us that the bookings and the searches of hotels and flights and everything are creeping up a little bit for Iowa. So, you know, so that's really good that the bookings for hotels are starting to creep up a little bit. And this is one that's going to be of interest to a lot of people, is we are going to have arrivals by county, percentage by month. It's going to be on the dashboard when it comes out. So we have all 99 counties listed and the percentage of your travelers that come every month. And this has been really fascinating to look at, because when I went through all the percentages, there were some counties that had some kind of weird months that would pop up, but I would call them and say, yes, they would had a big festival or something that day. So it really reinforced how accurate this data really is. Then the bottom of it is the total of the counties traveling per month. And then this is just kind of give you an overall glance of traveler activity in the state of Iowa. We have travel in every single county, you know, and even if, you know, it looks like 0.14% of the travelers, but when you consider it's 28.3 million travelers, that's a lot of travelers coming into every single state, you know, so, and it's just really pretty amazing and fascinating to look at. So this is one chart that I just sat and really pondered a look at. This is the travel on the roads of Iowa, where people are traveling. You know, so one of the things I really talked about in all the webinars and research I've been looking at a lot lately is that the rural areas are going to recover first. When you look at our map, and I checked with the DOT last week, Iowa has 43,000 miles of paved roads. And when you look at that, I think about that, that's enough paved roads to go around the world 1.7 times. And that's one of the reasons Ragbri is so successful, is that Iowa has so many paved roads. So thinking about that, we're in a really good position with all of our paved roads and all of our highways, US highways, the state highways, and county roads, along with the interstates, to really bring travelers into our area. We got Chicago to the east of us, and then we got the interstate arteries. So we're really in a good position to recover, especially from the rural standpoint. But the other thing we kind of need to think about too, though, even the people who will be attracted to the rural areas, we got to make sure our rural communities are really accept the travelers. So there's going to be needing a lot of communication with our communities and have transparency that the travelers will be taking measures to travel safely, and that the attractions will be transparent in how they are sanitizing and having hand sanitizers and everything readily available. So there's going to be a lot of communication, a lot of work back and forth between the travelers and the attractions to make sure everyone is safe, and we'll really need to reassure both parties, the travelers and the communities. Now, Longwoods did a presentation this week. They're talking about, they thought the millennials and Gen Z would be the first ones out of the gate to travel, and then the boomers would be right behind them. So one thing people are going to be headed to are the beaches and cities and metro areas. So my gut feeling that would be your millennials and Gen Zs going to the beaches, and then your boomers going to more of the rural areas. And the boomers are really going to be going to friends and family too. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there that we can capture. So one of the things that's really going to trigger people to really start traveling again, I mean, they've really been starting to plan and they're starting to book, but they're really kicking into gear is when health departments and the CDC and the health experts really say it's safe and ready to go. So the more transparent we are about the procedures we are taking, that's what's really going to help us capture those travelers again. So yeah, the good news is the travelers are starting to plan their journeys, and we have resources to help you figure that out, and we're tracking it, and they're starting to plan. So we just see an uptick, and hopefully we don't have a second wave of COVID, and we can just be on the uprise. So the dashboard will be up on the website within an hour after this presentation. So you can take a look at that, and then email me or call me if you have any questions on that. With that, I will turn it back over to Katie.
Wonderful. Thank you, Luann. All right. At this time, I'm happy to open up if there's any questions or things on people's minds that you guys wanted to share during the forum. And I know that there was one question about foreign arrivals that was in our chat. And Timony, thank you for being able to answer that in the chat. I'm just letting everyone know that there are international panels, but they're quite small right now, even when accounting for smaller populations. So there are foreign arrivals as an option to track. Another question, can the data show for communities?
So it depends how we define communities. We track everything at the state of Iowa level, at the county level, the DMA level, which is like the metropolitan level, and then down to the city.
And I do know that the data that we'll have on the dashboard on our website, Luann, shows county, correct? That's what that you had multiple pages of?
Any travel by month per county. That will be on the dashboard. Yep.
All right. Any other questions? Success stories, random thoughts of the day.
Katie, I had a question for you, and I missed last week's forum, but do we know any more about a cooperative advertising program for fiscal year 21 that you might be presenting?
We are still working on that with legislators being out and not coming back until June 3rd. We still don't have a definite of what our budget is going to be for next fiscal year. So while we have some ideas in place, we can't make any plans or put together what we're going to buy into until that's decided.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if there are no other questions, I thank everybody for joining us. And next Wednesday, we will be having a, I just lost my train of thought. There have another presentation that's going to be on, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, Google. Can you just say what it is, Amy? Sorry.
Yes, it's a company that helps you update your Google listings and claim listings and give you some tips and tricks about how to work with Google.
Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Because as we saw with Arrivalist data and what we're seeing from other third-party sources, individuals are doing a lot of research online. So we want to make sure that you have the best tips and tricks for making sure that your Google accounts are to the highest level. So perfect. All right, well, thank you guys, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank you so much, Katie.